everyone. The PG and Research Department of English Holy Cross College Trichy is happy to organize and invite you for the webinar on the topic Critical Reflections of Literature and Culture in Research. We are glad to have our alumna Dr. Shanti Chitra, writer, head and associate professor in English SRM Institute Chennai as our resource person of today's session. Thank you, dear ma'am, for accepting our invitation. On behalf of our institution, I welcome you as well as I welcome each and every one of you for today's event. A note to the participants. Dear participants, thank you all for your overwhelming response towards your registration. Kindly note the following guidelines who have joined in Google Meet as well as through live streaming. Participants, kindly mute your audio and video throughout the session. Please do not click on the present now mode. Participants are welcome to post your questions in the chat box. Resource person will address your queries at the end of the session. It is mandatory to fill the feedback form through the link that will be shared only at the end of the session in the chat box. With no more delay, now I invite Ms. Juanita, Assistant Professor, Department of English, to lead us in prayer followed by welcome address. Over to you, Ms. Juanita.
Let us begin this webinar by invoking God's blessings. Almighty and loving Father, we praise and adore you. As we are gathered here today for this webinar, send your Holy Spirit to be our guide and give us the wisdom to understand the topic and the worthiness of this webinar. Give us the desire to find ways to excel in our work. Help us to work together and encourage each other towards excellence. And let us all marvel in the joy of being together on this beautiful day. We ask this in your precious name, Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. Knowledge is learning something new every day. And today is the day to widen our knowledge by learning something new. A pleasant evening to everyone. On behalf of the PG and Research Department of English, Shift 1 and 2, Holy Cross College Trichy, with unlimited bounds of joy and sparkle, I wholeheartedly welcome you all for this webinar on Critical Reflections of Literature and Culture in Research. With immense pleasure, I welcome our resource person, Dr. Shanti Chitra, writer, associate professor, head of the Department of English, Faculty of Science and Humanities, SRM Institute of Technology, Chennai. She has 17 years of teaching experience. She is the proud alumna of our college. Ma'am completed a UG and PG in Holy Cross College and a MPhil and PhD in Bishop Eaper College, Trichy. She has also completed MS Counseling and Psychotherapy. She was the best outgone student of our college in the year 2000 and in the year 2002 and also best cadet and state level shooter in NCC. She has participated and presented 17 papers in national and international conferences and also published 38 research articles in journals, 12 publications in referee journals, 2 edited books and 1 international multilingual journal, 3 novels, 1 translation novel, 2 short stories and 1 poem and chapters in 2 books. She has also been a resource person and given many lectures in various colleges in and around Tamil Nadu. Adding to her credit, she has received the following awards: Teachers' Day Award in SRM University 2014, Savitri Bai Phule Award by Dalit Sahitya Academy for Writing for the Upliftment of the Marginalized Community in 2015, Premchand Award for Young Writer by Lucknow University in 2016. Still, ma'am lies ahead to achieve in the field of literature. Hearty welcome to you, ma'am. I take joy in welcoming our secretary, Reverend Sister Dr. Niranjana Andoni Sami, whose spiritual support has guided us through long ways. I also welcome the fervent supporter and the strongest pillar, the principal of Holy Cross College, Reverend Sister Dr. Christina Bridget, for giving us this platform for higher education. I extend a cordial welcome to our Vice Principal and the Head of the Department of English, Reverend Sister Dr. Judy Gomes, for rendering us this opportunity and bringing us further more means to enlighten knowledge. I render a genial welcome to our professors of the Department of English, both Shift 1 and 2, who have always been there to scatter the light of knowledge. A hearty welcome to all the participants from Holy Cross College and other colleges, and I hope you take the best that you can from this lecture and the purpose be a fruitful one. Once again, a hearty welcome to all of you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your warm words of welcome. With immense joy, I hand over the session to our resource person, Dr. Shanti Chitra. Ma'am, over to you.
I'm fortunate to be here today. Thank you so much for all the good words. But when I get it from Holy Cross, I must say all that belongs only to Holy Cross, my alma mater. Whatever I am today is because of the nurturing that I got from all the sisters and my teachers from our lovely campus, Holy Cross. And I cannot forget the way we used to run to the library, the spiral staircase. If whenever we rewind back and think of some memories in our life, for me, what conspicuously stands out is that library, the red oxide. Under my feet, I can still feel the chillness, and the evening the sun's warmth that I used to get when we used to randomly pick books, and then later the discussions that we used to have. Now, I must say that is my foundation, and I hope I continue to grow with all that Holy Cross has given me. Thank you. The title of the talk that I'm going to deliver today is Critical Reflections of Literature and Culture in Research. I'm going to basically deal today about what research is like in literature. What are the responsibility that a literary writer has, and similarly, what are the responsibility that a researcher in literature shares, and what are the duties of an interpreter, and how an interpreter becomes responsible for establishing a culture in this society, and how an interpreter of a literature has to have a very expanded consciousness and not a limited one, how he or she with a limited consciousness can never be able to contribute good to the society, are some of the points which we will be which I'll be trying to explore, and at the end we are going to see what kind of a novel is Vladimir Nabokov's Lolita, and what has it contributed to the society directly and indirectly. First of all, how do we look at research done on literature? Generally, when a scientist claims that a simple looking little protein in a test tube can be used to alter the genome or the DNA of a plant or animal or human being, we get shocked, we get surprised, we are awestruck. But we fail to consider that many a time, in fact, in a much greater capacity, literary pieces also only do such changes in human mind. They alter the very pattern of thinking, and the approach toward life is changed by literature. Though what is done is through the culture which is presented in the work. Now, the culture which is presented in a literary piece is interpreted by a reader or by a researcher. Now, that particular interpreter, more than the creator of that book itself, helps in creating and establishing a culture, establishing a new pattern of thinking in a human being. For culture is nothing but the instructions packed and passed on for the minds to observe and expand consciously. Now, they are the one who actually set the norms for the world to follow. So it is basically the literature which actually builds human mind. Human beings that we have around us today, if they are troubling us, or if they are making our life comfortable, or if they try to suffocate us, everything is through the kind of a stories or the indoctrination or the kind of a literature that they are exposed to have built them to become that. Now, this is the basic idea which is to be understood by every writer, every reader of a piece of a literature. Apart from that, one very important point which is to be understood is understanding one's culture have always been the greatest passion for the modern man. He knows that culture is a powerful tool with which he has tried to understand the world, and he has tried to handle the world. He knows that culture is a powerful tool for survival itself. Knowing the very advent, the very root, actually establishes him further strongly in the race. So we find some sort of unearthing keeps taking place everywhere. Archaeologists, when dig up and get some broken pots, artifacts of ancient people, it helps in uncovering their cultural pattern. For anthropologists and the behavioral scientists, culture is the human being's a learned behavior. It's a learned human behavior pattern. The learned human behavior pattern describes what is opposite to animism. So basically, humanism is opposite to animism. So humanism is all that we call as culture. Animals also have a culture, but if our research is oriented to human beings, then it is humanism that we look for in the proposed culture. Please do follow me closely, because all these points later we are going to use to check by analyzing certain pieces of literature and come to a conclusion about if we really have humanism or an evolved culture. Have we got all these through literature, or is it like all these literature are in a way responsible for whatever we are today? We all might have seen astronomers looking up in the sky. Generally, there is a mental block that most of us suffer in general while thinking about sky. We think that sky, astronomy, telescope, they're all futuristic. That we are always looking only for scope for living in another planet later. But actually speaking, most telescopes helps us to look whatever that it tries to make us look is only we are looking back in time. The distant galaxies that appear to us through those telescopes as they were millions of years ago is the truth which we always fail to see. Those whatever that we see through those telescopes are only some reality which had existed millions of years ago. What this suggests to us is that this is also just like how archaeologists try to dig deep under the earth to know our past. We are only trying to see our past in the sky as well. So are we kind of even capable of a future at all? Now that's another question that might arise in our mind. But before answering that question, I would like all of us to have a look at these pictures. These are a few glimpses of the Chilean women who for more than 40 years were searching for murdered loved ones of theirs. During the period of dictatorship of Augusto Pinochet, there was a kind of a destruction which he caused. He had caused so many murders, and around 26 men were in particular murdered, and their bodies were thrown in the desert part of Kalama city. And when this was done, the sand where they were buried beneath the sand, the area is one of the most hostile deserts in the earth. So the whole of the earth, the most hostile desert, if you want to consider, this is one of them. And since 1973, since they were thrown there, the family members of those murdered men, the women members in particularly, have been reaching this part of this place, and were trying to find pieces of their bones. And whenever they got any piece, they sent them for DNA tests later and identified to whom they belonged to, and respected those bones by giving them a proper burial. Now, giving a proper burial is one of the most essential part in our culture, and this they kept doing like religiously, ritually for so many years. Now, this was the sole work of these women for more than 40 years. They were not violent, they were not attacking anybody. Every day, every morning, they woke up to do only this work, and whatever they got, they tried to identify and they gave a proper burial. The point here is, apart from what was happening on the ground of this Chile land, Chile happens to be, interestingly, the astronomical observatory. The world's best astronomical observatory is established there, because the sky above this land has the best or the most beautiful visuals of galaxies, it seems. Now, that's the irony here. Now, what is even more sad is there's not much of literature written on this particular reality. Now, whenever I think of them, I used to wonder if someone from past or someone from future, if looks from the sky and had happened to see these women doing it for 40 years regularly, been only searching for the bones of their dear ones, what kind of an impression would we be creating to a different world, if a different world existed at all? Can we call this humanism? A contrast with that of animism, which we keep claiming, is this the one? When we have let fellow human being to suffer infinitely for decades together, and have left them to look for their lost people in the desert of dictatorship, can we even claim that we are really cultured or civilized or have evolved at all? Having those questions in our mind, let us move on to the next and understand what a research is in a literature. Essentially, research has always been to trace the difference. The essence of creation being an effort to establish a difference, and most of the writers themselves try to present themselves different from the others. We have to look for if we are agreeing with the earlier researcher or if we are differing from them. The comparison field will help us to lead to that kind of a consciousness. By establishing the difference, one can check the similarities later at a stage. Initially, one will have to look at all the previous researches that has been carried out in that particular field and look for a gap to find out what has been missed by the previous researchers or what are the scopes created by the previous researchers. So having all these things in our mind, one will have to carry out a research. And why do a research can be another question. Why a research at all? Now, this is a very beautiful line which we cannot forget as a researcher, because Charles Darwin happens to be the one exponent who, in spite of all the odds, was daring enough to talk truth. He was the one who said that if you had an idea that was going to outrage society, would you keep it to yourself? That is highly impossible. Obviously, no, we cannot keep it to ourselves. The urge that every human being has to communicate, to tell the world what he or she has in one's mind, is something which is very essential part of evolution. Why do we read Socrates or Plato? Why do research in literature? Why know any theory? Why apply it on literature? Now, these are all several other questions which will find an answer when you will know why you're doing a research on literature. The utility of literature is something which cannot be measured ordinarily. The very reason why you have such questions is that we have started believing that technologies are better and they alone inherently are capable of bringing change, and they alone are capable of taking us away from the natural living. So they alone can elevate human condition to a higher platform, or the kind of a belief that we generally have established. But the point is, literature also only intends the same. Culture also only proposes this, to evolve. But the seminal question is, have we evolved through our stories? Now, this is something which in the beginning itself I spoke about, that we will be discussing today, the novel Lolita. The word Lolita, which has driven me to prepare this whole talk today, is something which is very disturbing for me. And I would suggest that all of you also read this novel and then check what you essentially feel like. Who do you sympathize with? Because that's the most important question that you have to answer to yourself first, to understand what you actually are as a person. The word, the meaning for the word Lolita in dictionary is a sexually precocious young girl. Precocious in the sense developing an inclination for something at an earlier age than usual. Here, she is precocious. She has shown her interest in sexual life at a very earlier age. So any child, if a young girl, if she shows her interest in sex life, then she will be called as Lolita. Where did we get this word from? Now, even before that, I felt sad that I could not find an equal word for boys. Not that I want an equal word or a similar word for boys. In fact, I'm grateful that I haven't found one, and I wish I don't find one as well. Yet, it disturbs that there is one for girls. You will find a particular girl in a novel written by Tehmina Durrani. The novel's name is Blasphemy, in which you will come across a little girl who's around 9 to 10 years old or so, who's kept as a sex slave by a wealthy religious man. And this was prepared, the whole scene was prepared. I mean, this girl was brought to that man by the wife of that man because she wanted to keep her own daughters away from him. So if you want to describe that little girl, the word that you have in your dictionary is Lolita. Now, who has contributed to this? Who has given this word to the world, Lolita. Vladimir Nabokov wrote a novel titled Lolita in the year 1955 in France. Then in 1958, he had its American publication, and this word got its meaning in culture after that. There's another word which you will come across in this word, which was Nymphet, which also became popular only after this. Lolita has an unreliable narrator. Unreliable narrator is one whose credibility is compromised, and hence sympathizing with him will be little difficult for anybody. So this is part of of the making of the novel. You can find that you have a narrator whom you cannot completely trust. Now these unreliable narrators are the kind of people who have some problem in their mind, so you can't totally trust whatever they are trying to say. So the novel has a fictional preface, a foreword by John Ray. He happens to be the editor of Psychology book. Now Ray states that a memoir was written by a man using the pseudonym Humbert Humbert, who had recently died of heart disease while awaiting a murder trial in jail. The memoir begins with his birth in Paris in 1910. He spends his childhood near French coastal region, where he falls in love with his friend Annabel Lee. She dies very young. This makes Herbert sexually obsessed with a specific type of a girl. He did not grow beyond that girl actually. So that particular type of girl that he preferred were aged between 9 to 14. So he refers to them as Nymphet. Later, he becomes a teacher of English and falls for a little girl, that is Dolores, and he marries Dolores' mother for this sake, to get intimate with Dolores. And the pet name that he had given to Dolores was Lolita. Meanwhile, he writes everything in a novel. He was still to explain his desire to Dolores when everything was written in a diary. The mother of Dolores, she happened to see this. She reads it and she gets disgusted by how much he was disgusted by her and how much he was passionate toward her daughter. Now this disturbs her so much that she sends messages to all her friends, and then she tries to escape from that place, but then she gets hit and then she dies in an accident. Now he, after that, he takes her with him. Herbert keeps Lolita with him, and then he uses her for his sexual desires. Now, Lolita never said no, but then she was not much interested in him because he was giving her lots of gifts, and then she loved traveling, so things were happening with him like that, with her like that. Now, he was a child molester, but what is very sad is this book was much appreciated, and people totally sympathized with Herbert because later. He was so passionate toward Lolita, but then Lolita seemed like was only using him, and then she escaped from him. Later she gets married to another man. She was 17-year-old when she writes a letter back to him saying that she wants her mother's money. And when he for years together, he was searching for her. When he gets this letter, Herbert goes in search of her. He finds that she was pregnant, and then the man she had married him was not the one who was responsible for abducting him. So he traces that man. He goes, kills him. Meanwhile, Lolita dies in giving birth to a child. Now he was a disturbed man. He was in the he was during his trial period, was in the jail, and he dies. Now this created so much sympathy in the readers. They all felt that Lolita is the reason for Herbert's death. They sympathized with him. They branded Lolita as someone who exploited him, used him. So the whole story took this kind of a turn in the minds of people. We have to know that there was a similar actual incident which had taken place in New Jersey in 1948. It was a story of a child molester. He was his age was around 50 years. He was a mechanic who caught a 11-year-old Sally, a girl. She was stealing a 5-cent worth notebook, and this man caught her saying that he was an FBI agent. He threatened her and he kept her with him as a sex slave for years, and they kept traveling for very long. Now, this was a story which shocked people. They did not sympathize with him. They hated him. But when a similar story was made into a novel, people sadly sympathized with the molester. The thing is, when they read the news, they were sympathizing with the child, but when they read a novel, they were not able to do it. I would like to bring everyone's attention to the slide. Mohanlal Sharma happens to be the learned lawyer. He's popular for the Nirbhaya case because he was the opposition lawyer. According to him, it is the women who actually create circumstances for rape. He very vehemently mentioned that when a woman goes out after 8 o'clock, after 9 o'clock in the night, then she is likely to wrought such incident upon herself. She will get raped because men after 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, when they get to see a woman outside loitering around, they will rape her. So it seems like men after midnight, men after sunset, they become beast. So that is the point perhaps he sadly is trying to mention to the world. Where did he get this kind of a mindset? How could he say that men can do this and women should stay back? And to the extent of that, he argued that a 2-year-old child in Calcutta got raped in the night, and the child was actually sleeping in the path because the child belonged to a homeless family. So the parents were sleeping beside and the child was sleeping the other side, and the child got raped. And the man says the parents are responsible because they did not protect the child. They let the child sleep in the night outside. Now, what kind of an understanding does this this lawyer possess, and what kind of culture that we have promoted? What exactly has built the psyche of such thinking? The essential ingredients that has made this person to think like that, we need to understand that. To understand the subjective truth of an individual or the culture or the society, we have to look into the kind of stories that has made them. You have to understand the subjective myth of the individual, the culture of the country, the kind of a belief that they have, the stories that they were constructed by, the myths that they hold close to themselves. What kind of a story do they believe? What has constructed them? Now, all that when you will check, you will understand there's something called consciousness. And this consciousness is nothing like an earthenware, an urn, which keeps filling itself with all that it gets exposed to. So it keeps expanding and expanding, and then it keeps building its own understanding of the world. Now, what kind of an understanding would Mohanlal Sharma would have got? Now that's one question. But before answering that, I would like to ask this question. Who is the villain in Merchant of Venice? Imperviously, immediately, almost every person who has read this play would immediately say that it is Shylock. Because Shylock is the one who was demanding for a pound of flesh from a human body. Antonio was a good friend to Bassanio. He was ready to do anything for him. Bassanio was in return again was ready to save him somehow. So Shylock is the one who's the villain. But actually speaking, William Shakespeare very intelligently had actually camouflaged a truth. He has actually tried to understand the mind of the people. Uh, During the time when he had written this, more than 20,000 people were killed because of this Holocaust. So he cannot directly support Shylock at all. But still, he has tried to present a long dialogue on mercy, to show mercy. But what had happened with Shylock was he was insulted by Antonio and Bassanio. Now, if somebody constantly insults you, he was called as a cur, a dog. Antonio and Bassanio, they used to spit on his gabardine. In this very lifetime, he was insulted constantly. And then when he gets a chance, won't he take revenge? That was the human normal tendency which Shylock was talking about. Now this, if you look at, you can only see Shylock as a victim, not as a villain. A victim who's reacting and trying to take revenge for what had happened with him. But still, for more than 500 years now, in every classroom, what is taught is that Shylock is the villain. So what has happened? Maybe Shakespeare intentionally had done that, or did we read it differently? What exactly has happened is to be understood. Now, the next question is, do we have a proper critical thinking? Can we reimagine things? Or do we have to accept whatever was told to us for years together? Now, this critical thinking will make us understand any reality. Critical thinking alone can actually help us understand or get closer to even any truth. I would like to bring everyone's attention toward this very important character in Ramayana, Surpanakha. And almost every version she was mutilated. In some it was her nose alone, and in many other versions we find that her ears and even breasts were cut off. Now this was accepted as a normal act by our perfect heroes. Those were epitomes of perfection, and they were responsible for this. Now this is a story which is there running in our blood. It is there, which is in our mind, and which is accepted, normal, and it is continuing along with us. We have to understand that this is a truth which not many know, that according to National Crime Records Bureau, reported approximately 500 to 1,000 cases of acid attack per year in India. The perpetrator's aim here is not to kill the victim, but to leave her in a pathetic condition. The injuries on the body will heal and leave scars, not only on the body, but also physically and psychologically. The whole personality of the survivor will be affected. Now that is what acid attack does to a person. Think about what is it, or how is it related to Surpanakha getting mutilated. Surpanakha in a sense means the sharp nose. Surpanakha. So when will you name a child with such a name? It seems she was a beautiful woman, and the most prominent feature on her face was her nose. Now you go, you cut that, and then you disfigure her. Compared to women throughout the world, women in India are at higher risk of being victims of acid attacks. It seems 72% of reported acid attacks in India have involved women. There are much which is not reported at all, but those which were reported, Most of them are only attacks on women in India. Now that is how I was trying to connect. If this is the culture which is running in our blood because of the kind of stories that we have imbibed. Now this is for kind of an understanding of what is Surpanaka and what is Lolita. We have to understand if the writer really intend to talk this, or are we just getting carried away by something else. Were those ambiguity intentional, or are we just trying to see something which or are we trying to miss out something which the writer is trying to say? We have few writers who have deliberately have veiled certain truths, and unless we dig it up like the archaeologists, or unless like how we look up at the sky through the telescope deeply to see certain truth, we can never unearth the truth that the writer might have had in his mind. Shakespeare is one. You have the example of Iago. Iago seems like a villain, but then what had happened with him was not right also. So do we get the layers of other meanings and intentions we have to look at as well. Was Vladimir Nabokov also one? There must be some clue left by him somewhere in the novel which can be revealed only by a researcher. The way Nietzsche, Nietzsche also suffered a similar setback. Nietzsche was revealed to the world by a researcher only, because for years together nobody read him because of the black mark that his work had rotted upon him. That he was the one who was responsible for building Hitler, a man who was but then what the researcher found out was that Nietzsche was such a sensitive man that he, seeing a horse being beaten by the horseman, he collapsed hugging the horse, saying that he could do nothing to save him. And that day when Nietzsche collapsed, he did not wake up for 10 years. He remained insane, and then he died in insanity. So how is it possible for someone who's so sensitive toward a horse can be responsible for annihilation of so many human beings in the name of a superior race? Now his Übermensch meant something else, but then it was misinterpreted by the reader. The Hitler is the kind of an idea which this researcher actually bought out. Similarly, we will find another work that is Rope by Patrick Hamilton. You will find there were two students who were who misunderstood what the teacher was trying to say, and they went and murdered their class topper, believing that's what the teacher wanted. Now, nothing was more shocking to the teacher than this misinterpretation, but then this kind of a misinterpretations do take place. Was Nabokov was shocked too is the question. Did he simply sit back and studied the normal mentality of human beings? So these are some of the questions which a researcher alone can unravel. A good research is only that. Now, these are some of the questions which we will have to keep asking. Are we lacking something when we try to understand a piece of literature? Is something which is already there in our head is clouding our understanding? Are we trying to understand only what is present literally, or are we trying to see the metaphorical meaning as well? How are we supposed to carry out an interpretation? How are we going to keep our ego and all the indoctrination aside and then interpret a literature? Now, these are some of the points which we have to remember and question. What are the responsibilities of a writer? Can a writer allow ambiguity? To what extent can he allow ambiguity? Won't these ambiguities disturb certain patterns of culture itself? If you keep thinking, you'll be able to understand what absurd theater was like. What was the purpose of absurd theater? They called it absurd theater. The viewer, the reader, they named it absurd theater, but it did not mean absurdity. It only seemed absurd to them. So now all these things would give a researcher an understanding of how humanities researcher has to be different from others, how evolved his thinking and understanding has to be to know the true meaning of their research. According to Longman Encyclopedia, culture is a collection of meanings, values, morals, mode of thinking, pattern of behavior, idioms of thought, of speech, ways of life, etc., and identifying them in a particular nation, state, group, or social category can be called as a culture. So in that sense, culture has to have all these things essentially, and if they fail, then we cannot really call ourselves cultured. Now, another very important point that we have to have is this consciousness. The way we have observed the world is going to make us view the world also in a similar manner. So you're like how a visually challenged person cannot be told what exactly it is to understand a color, like what is white or what is black, because you just cannot know something that you cannot know. So how to explain it to somebody who has no idea about it? So you cannot tell a person, even if he claims himself as a learner, that irrespective of if a child is sleeping outside or if a girl is roaming around in the night, one need not and should not go disturb her or rape her or kill her. Everybody is a human being and they have a right to go out or not to go out. That is a decision which they will have to make themselves. So a girl will not roam around 9 o'clock at night was the statement made by this lawyer. He said, if you throw the gem on the street, certainly dogs will take it away. You cannot stop it. Now that was Mohanlal Sharma's actual sentences. So how exactly was he able to blame the girl for the whole heinous crime to have taken place? When this is one point, and apart from that, we have very important way of this is another theory which we have to study. This is unreliable narrator part. Many a time people use it to talk about certain things which cannot be accepted by all. So sometimes you will come across artists who have certain difficulty, in the sense you will find there's a streak of insanity in them. Is it possible for them to perform in spite of that is one question. Is it is it something which is within us, or is it really is within them? Do we have some kind of a limitedness in our consciousness which is making us think that the artist is limited in thinking and is insane? That's why he is proposing such thoughts. Is one point which we have to keep thinking, because we do not have an answer to that yet. But if we will look at this painting, and if we try to understand the philosophy behind this painter's this particular painting, we can understand a few points, and that is René Magritte's painting is this. It is called "This Is Not a Pipe." He painted this pipe, and then under that he wrote that this is not a pipe. No matter how much one tries to depict life, life is an art. Now that's the idea that he is trying to present. It will always remain only as an art. It is never real. Now that's why when he made this painting, he simply wrote that this is not a pipe. But to many, the moment they see it that this is not a pipe, they start trying to understand what exactly is it then, if it is not a pipe. And then this modern art has given us this tendency of trying to look for something else from what is given to them. So people started wondering what it is. But the point that he was trying to tell directly is that this is just a painting, but this is not a pipe. And a thing is a thing, not what is said of that thing. It's one favorite line of mine, in the sense, I mean, I love this line. I came across this in the movie Birdman. It was not said by anybody in that movie. It's just a postcard message. You'll find it displayed on the dressing room mirror in the movie. It's just there, and when you look at it, when I looked at it, I felt that it means a lot. It says a lot. To me, what it means is, while trying to explain something, we deviate from the actual. The further and further we move away from the actual. I cannot explain what is white to a person incapable of vision. I might try saying that it's something which is not black. Again, whatever I'm saying is not going to get even closer to the truth of being white. So what an art does mostly is it actually lets one to misinterpret. And there is a kind of a flatness about literature which is created because of the depth and details that we give there. When you read a newspaper content about a child molester, you're angry with the person. But then when you write a story about the same molester, you try to look at the psychological deviations, the sufferings that he has had, the passion that he has towards, all that. When you look at, you start sympathizing with the person. Sometimes the very details that art gives actually takes us to a different terrain, a very different platform, where you start misinterpreting things. And then right now our society is not in a level where you can start sympathizing with the molester, is the point of view which we have to remember. But what we find here is this writer has taken the case of unreliable narrator. He has used that kind of an intelligence in his narration. So that somehow shows that maybe the writer himself also is not exactly how we are trying to interpret. There are levels which is to be understood. When Nietzsche was misinterpreted, his Thus Spake Zarathustra was when it was misinterpreted. When Patrick Hamilton's Rope in detail talks about how the teacher was misinterpreted, we will find that a writer gave birth to an annihilator like Hitler. That was the accusation, that a writer has given birth to Hitler, which is there in the earlier case. Thus Spake Zarathustra became a kind of the book in every hands of Nazi. And then in Rope we find that a teacher gave birth to a murderer. Now these are all the accusations which will be there. Now who's responsible for that, and how to take responsibility for that? Now we have this, he's one of my favorite writers, Saadat Hasan Manto. He spoke nothing but truth all his life, but most people till date also, they have no understanding about what he has written. They call him insane. They find that his ideas are unnecessary. They are not necessary for this culture. But he has whatever is lacking in the culture, and the pointlessness and the meaninglessness, the unnecessary moral values, or the morality, in the name of morality, the cruelty which takes place. Now, these are all the points which he has discussed, but it seems like it might take another 50 to 100 years for us to understand this man, and meanwhile, until then, perhaps we would call him that he is insane. So this is likely to happen, and that is one thing which we have to understand about the reader's interpretation. And these are two paintings which are very important. One by The Starry Night by Van Gogh. Van Gogh is known for being psychologically unstable. So all his paintings that he has been painting, he was not completely sane when he did that. But his arts are among the most popular and most famous artist of all time is he. Van Gogh's techniques of painting he would be using the tube directly on the canvas, and those brush strokes made up vivid colors. They squeezed straight from the tube, and it inspired generations of artists. But basically, he was unstable in his mind. And the other one is The Scream, the painting by Edward Munch. He's an icon, is considered as an icon for modern art. After Leonardo da Vinci, he is considered to be the next greatest artist. He is defined, he's known for his, Leonardo da Vinci is known for serenity and self-control. All his works will have that. But then he's quite an opposite to what Leonardo da Vinci was. You will find he has defined how we see our own age, actually. Like, you will find that the beings in his paintings would be racked with anxiety and uncertainty. And we can see that similar is what the works of absurd theater would be like. And similar is what the concept of modern Black Mirror series would give us. The new narration, to the point we go out and try and understand new normals in the new chaos that the new world has given us. So then Scream is considered as autobiographical. It is an experiment. It's an experiment of an expressionistic construction based on his own actual experience of a scream piercing through nature while on a walk. After his two companions seem in the background had left him, which we can see there, the sound he felt was heard by him. He was not in a normal state again. He was mentally disturbed. But whatever he felt, he tried to recreate it, and that is the Scream. And Scream, let us understand, is one of the most popular paintings and the most costliest of paintings today. And his paintings actually depicts, particularly this one, will depict that if one is pushed to extreme, can destroy human integrity. Now, that's the point which he tries to put forth. Now, this is a point which we have to remember. Why Lolita? Why Lolita was written? Lolita somehow makes me understand is very much similar to the Scream, and which is so much is opposite to Leonardo da Vinci or the painting of Mona Lisa, because there's no serenity in it, but then there's only chaos, and then we accept chaos and we buy it because that's what we have in our mind most of the time. We relate with that so easily. Lolita is accepted similarly. These are some kind of a connection which happens in spite of all the there must be some denial, but then this connection somehow makes sense always to me. Now, we find that madness has always traveled along with in arts. Most great pieces which we consider or recognize now as great is all in one way or other produced by those artists whom we consider as insane, as not normal, as not stable in mind. So there is an instance which actually makes me wonder. in Kudzi's novel Summertime, where two mentally disturbed people will be talking to each other about their helplessness. That's a very important point in the whole literature which is to be considered, because what they talk about there in a way creates the purpose of the novel. The purpose of novels like Lolita, identification of a fictional character with the correct understanding. Irony and ambiguity that creates diversity has to be understood. As I told you before, Lolita is similar to Edward Munch's Scream, because they both mean something similar. And then we are almost toward the end, where I would like everyone to pay attention to one of my favorite writers, because of the responsibility that he has in his mind when he writes is enormous. Is the one writer who's not completely is understood by all yet, who has not given much scope so far for all to misinterpret, according to me. Because in spite of not everybody agreeing with him, he is one who has not given any scope for this kind of a misinterpretation in any of his work. His understanding of human consciousness is so deep that he has even characters, as I mentioned before, who are in asylum, who are mentally disturbed, who lack the stability of mind, who are locked in that asylum rooms, will be having conversations. And those conversations might sound disjointed or broken or only mumbles most of the time to the so-called normals. But within those disturbed minds, there would be a mother's thoughts being conveyed to another disturbed man. Clearly, she'll be talking about it to him. They will be able to understand each other. We, when we'll be listening to the same conversation, will not be able to understand, because we are the so-called normals. Her anxiety for having left behind an 8-year-old daughter with her stepfather, who was found molesting that daughter of hers. By her own eyes, she witnessed it. Actually, what happens in the novel is she had left. She goes out for some purchase. She had left behind her 8-year-old daughter with her husband, her second husband, and then she remembers that she had left behind the purse. So she rushes back when she finds that the stepfather was molesting her. Now that was the moment when she collapses there. She loses her mind. When she wakes up, she finds herself in the mental asylum. Whatever she tries to say, it only becomes a mumble. Now all those disjointed words reaches no one. Now that child is left with that man forever. Now this is something which is causing even more disturbance. But who's to understand? To whom is she to tell? There is no one who's there to understand her. Now she has totally lost her sanity, and she doesn't know when she is going to go out of this place, and she's forever is doomed into that place. Now every human, every woman, when would read this this book, that page, they would feel like they are stuck in hell. I would like to say that when I read that, I closed the book. Until date, I have not completed Summertime, because I was not able to go beyond it. Now, if a writer is capable of creating this kind of a sensitivity in a person, now that alone is the need of this moment. Now, that's the responsibility required, and that's the responsibility to be understood, not anything else. Lolita is one narration which is evident enough to understand how the world can misinterpret. Lolita, the word itself is used normally, that you think that a 12-year-old girl, a child, can be responsible for a man to make her molest, and also become responsible for the man's fall itself, is the kind of a culture that we have given to this world through the novel. And we also find a similar culture there passed on in a country like India through the myths, through the stories, through such cultural understanding. Any purpose, the common purpose of any literature or humanities oriented research is of contributing to an ongoing dialogue in the area of study. Absolute answers we shall never arrive at, because an evolving being can never end at any point. That's the example which we can find in the examples like Black Mirror I told you about. The new technology, the new normal, the new problems. So we have to start living inside all those problems and then try to solve them. We are not evolved enough to understand ambiguity. We are not evolved enough to have social experimental kind of novels. Giving such ideas and people has only contributed to words like Lolita getting into dictionary. These are the point of views which we have to look into. Or maybe as a researcher we can come up with something else also. Maybe Lolita was written altogether with a different stance, perhaps. Whatever it is, that is to be brought out, and a kind of a sensitization has to take place through research. So this is what a literary researcher has to do to help in evolving into better human beings in actuality, is the note with which I would like to stop now. Thank you so much for all the opportunity.
Thank you, ma'am, for your valuable information throughout your presentation. Now the session is open for discussion. I invite Ms. Brisha, Assistant Professor, Department of English, to comprehend and spell out the questions from the chat box to our resource person.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
It was such an splendid presentation, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
There's one question.
Yes,
How
ma'am.
do our research, when the language itself keeps evolving and literature is fluid, not static one?
Can you repeat it, ma'am?
How do our research, when the language itself keeps evolving and literature is fluid, not static one?
I would say that research, when it comes to literature, is more like a relay race. You complete your research maximum between the period of, like you can 5 to 7 years within which you can complete it. And when you take a piece of literature, you will be taking it from a particular period. Say, for example, if yours is a modern literature, there are two ways of looking at it. One is restricting it to that era or period in which it was written, and then questioning it or analyzing it based on that particular era. So that way, you don't have to worry about the evolving of language or the fluidity of literature. Otherwise, if you're giving it a kind of a comparative study, and then if you're taking it to another level, then again it has its own restrictions. Now you can fix your restrictions. You don't have to worry about it. By the time when I will finish it, this whole idea would have changed. Like, that is not as likely. So you can fix your limits, and then accordingly you can progress.
Thank you, ma'am. There's one more question, ma'am.
Yes.
The concept of culture keeps changing from time to time. How can a researcher place their research after a passage of time? Ma'am, you want me to repeat the question?
No. I think this is more or less similar to the previous question. It keeps changing. I would like to mention there is the new era, the new normal that we keep talking about, there is this um, the technology based problems that people are facing today, the addiction to technologies. Now if you come across the series called Black Mirror, you will come to know what kind of problems and solutions are presented there. So we are moving on to a very different culture, but when it goes to the earlier era's culture, they remain the same. We pick, our root is that, so we pick our solution somewhere from there, and then we move on to the next. So it's not something which is very difficult. But if you find that you cannot relate with it totally, there is always a number of theories available, like the death of an author. You can always give your interpretations, and you can give your point of view to it based on the culture or the era that you belong to, and can always carry on with your research.
Thank you, ma'am. Uh, what are the recent trends for pursuing research?
In the sense, ma'am?
In the point of view of pursuing research, the question is about the recent trends.
Recent trends, when it comes to literature, you can apply any field of expertise in it. In the sense, we are more toward interdisciplinary now. Literature is not something which is only about certain books which has been written. Interdisciplinary is quite famous in other developed countries, but we were not moving toward that. That has started taking place here. Understanding life or literature by applying it with other fields of other fields as well. Like you can have there are, I know there are people doing researches uh, uh, in architecture and applying theories of Tamil literature, of Sangam literature. So these kind of combinations are taking place. Literature and film studies can go hand in hand. So interdisciplinary, you can call it as a trend if you want me to talk about trends.
Thank you, ma'am. The next question. Most often, researchers of literature face a difficult question like, what's the social importance of your research? So, what's your take on it?
Even at the beginning, I said that when it comes to research in literature, people have this question of that it is not going to take us anywhere. And but the thing is, as I told you, that the little protein that they have frozen in their test tube. They say that it can change the genome, the DNA of anything, a plant, animal, human being. Now, I believe that when it comes to literature, the ideas that is embedded in it, whatever is said in that, helps in changing the thinking pattern. That's why I took Lolita up. Lolita became dangerous because we have contributed such a word to dictionary, and people are, so if you find a little girl um, uh, with certain behavioral pattern, they might address her as Lolita. Now, this kind of a dangerous contribution is also as likely, but then there are genuine books and then novels which has changed the pattern of thinking of ours for eons together. So, what we do is this research contributes to the society to make a better world for the rest. For the rest of the human beings, like we are able to tell them how exactly to create a better place for the rest of the human beings. So, and I think like nothing is more important than that.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
How can we put feminism and cultural studies together while doing research focusing on representation of characters?
Um, Feminism, if you want to look at from the cultural point of view, so many invasions have taken place in our country. If like I mean, which point of view you want to take it, from our country or from the international standpoint. We have to decide that. If it comes to our country, you can look at all the characters that were depicted in the mythologies and the scriptures that we have had. What kind of a strength were given to them, or what kind of a representation? Like, for example, I have lots of questions when it comes to Indian mythologies. Like, we have the character Vrinda. Vrinda was raped by God himself to establish dharma. He gave compensation of she becoming the sacred plant. Now that's a very big question. And likewise, we have Ahalya, and likewise, as we discussed, Surpanaga. We have questions for Sita. Now, when you trace all these things, they were strong, but then somewhere they were muted. They never raised any questions against anybody. So similarly, you trace back to literature, the writers, the kind of characters that they have created in India, from Anita Desai to till date, like whatever kind of a character they have presented, you can look at it like that. And another point of view, which is very important, is Sylvia Plath is one writer who's eulogized like anything. But I have certain questions as a woman. Was she was someone who's to be called a feminist, um, because the kind of acts that she indulged in cannot be a representation for all women. So the kind of a strength that she possesses is not really a strength. So there are a number of such critical questions. More than just merely talking about feminism, let us also become a feminist critique in our standpoint, which would help us to get a better views in our literature. So that's the point which I would stress upon.
Oh, thank you, ma'am. There's a final question.
Yes, ma'am.
Research is scientific, whereas literature is intuitive and imaginative. How can we fix research in literature? How can we search for truth in our research?
Now, there are simple points which we have to remember. Now, the stories that is told to us can be imaginative, but then the intention behind that is to establish a kind of a moral sense in us. So that is something which will be perceptible. Like, if I want to tell somebody the story of Harishchandra, maybe that story never happened. We do not know. But then what we are trying to say is, look at the kind of the resilience this man had showed. So when a child listens to that story, or when a human being keeps listening to that story, he might develop a sense toward truth. So the morality that develops inside him remains. So this is the point which we are tracing for. So it doesn't matter whether I'm, and then we also talk about science. Science itself has its roots only from imagination. So we cannot really say that imagination is away from truth. They are relative. And then when it comes to understanding an imagination through scientific uh, 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 charts or rules and regulations, it's not that difficult. It's possible.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
And there is one more question.
Yes, ma'am.
The last question. At present, when new education policy 2020 is started getting momentum, is it possible to see literature from a scientific point of view to pursue PhD?
In fact, if you talk from the point of view of NEP, in fact, I think this current policy, they have given more importance to literature and language than, we can even say equal importance to information technology, science, and language and literature. So we definitely have more scope, so we don't have to fear that.
Okay, ma'am. We have received one more question. Um, uh, can you name a few interdisciplinary research areas in recent trends?
recent trends, interdisciplinary, you can apply sociology to literature. And in fact, I would like to mention that the phenomenology which I had researched upon has got its roots in mathematics. So, the set theory is something which I had used to understand the characters, in the sense, the consciousness of a person. Like, how much do we merge, where do we lack, what do we understand about the other, where do we merge. Now all that comes from mathematics. So it depends upon, like, and in fact, it is so open that you can apply any area in any other area. Like, I gave you the example of an architect wanting to do research in Sangam literature. So he wants to do the Sangam architecture, kind of a comparison. So both will be taking place. So psychology is always there in literature. Film studies has got its roots in literature. Similarly, like, physics and mathematics go together. Now, it depends on our imagination and our understanding of the other subject. How well can we really work on that? Based on that, you can decide.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for answering the questions
Thank you, ma'am.
patiently. Thank you, ma'am. Over to Miss Durga.
Thank you, ma'am, for sharing your expertise with us. I'm sure you have fulfilled the thirst of the anticipated minds. Thank you, dear ma'am. Now I invite Ms. Revati, Assistant Professor, Department of English, for the formal note of thanks.
Good evening to you all. In God we have boasted continually, and we will give thanks to your name forever. Psalm chapter 44, verse 8. I thank the Almighty for his blessings on this wonderful day. The root of joy is gratefulness. On behalf of the Department of English, Holy Cross College, I take this opportunity to express my heartfelt gratitude to our chief guest. A proud alumna, Dr. Shanti Chitra, writer, head, associate professor in English, Faculty of Science and Humanities, SRM Institute of Science and Technology, Chennai. Ma'am, we are extremely privileged to listen to your interpretation on the topic critical reflection of literature and culture in research. It is evident that great knowledge comes from great experience and effort. Thank you, ma'am, for sharing a glimpse of your abundant knowledge on research in an hour. Specifically, the ideas you have shared on the character of Lolita, Surpanaga, and comparison of literary characters with present situation, the writings of Nietzsche and Manto's writing, and highlighted the novel like Disgrace and Lolita. And the reason you have explained well about the reason behind the writings of great novelists. I hope research on culture need responsibility of giving content for the people. Thank you, ma'am. I am grateful to our respectable secretary, Reverend Sister Dr. Niranjana Anthony Swami, for consistently rendering our moral support and encouragement in all our ventures. Thank you, Sister. Let me express my deep sense of gratitude to our dynamic principal, Reverend Sister Dr. Christina Bridget, an inspirational leader who inspires us with a tint of perseverance, dedication, and eternal vision. Thank you, Sister. I remain grateful to to our distinguished HOD, Vice Principal, Sister in charge of Shift 2, Reverend Sister Dr. Judy Combs, for being a solid support system who always encourage and allow us to explore the new path in our preceding journey of success. Thank you, Sister. I am delighted to thank all the teaching fraternity of the Department of English and participants who have come in overwhelming numbers. A special note of thanks to all the people who have worked behind the scene to make this event happen. I thank the technical team of Holy Cross College for live streaming this event. I also thank the students representative of English Literary Association for the dedicated work. Once again, I thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, dear ma'am. Thank you, Ms. Revati. Participants, kindly note the feedback link is posted in the chat box. It is mandatory to fill the feedback form to generate your certificate. You will receive your certificate within a week's time. Thank you all for your active participation. Hope the session was useful and fulfilled your expectation. Every ending is a new beginning with this fabulous session. We look forward to meet you in the future ventures. Thank you all.